Welcome. I'm grateful you've chosen to spend this time with me. Each month has its own characters. Some months ask us to move quickly. Some ask us to rest. Others quietly encourage us to strengthen something we've already begun. And then there are months like this one. Months that don't immediately ask us to do something new. Instead, they ask us a much more important question. Is the life you're building still the life you truly want? Sit with that for a moment. Not because it's an easy question, but because it is an honest one. I've noticed something over the years. People often imagine that meaningful change begins when a new opportunity appears. A better job, a new relationship, a fresh idea, a different city. But life has an interesting habit. The greatest changes rarely begin outside us. They begin the moment we become honest enough to admit that something inside us has already changed. Perhaps you've experienced this before. You wake one morning and nothing looks different. The same home, the same work, the same conversations. Yet somehow, they no longer fit in quite the same. Not because they're wrong, but because you've quietly become someone else. Most people try to ignore moments like these. We tell ourselves, perhaps I'm just tired. Perhaps this feeling will disappear. Perhaps I should simply carry on as I always have. Sometimes that's true. But sometimes life is inviting us into a deeper conversation. Not a conversation about changing everything. A conversation about paying attention. This month feels very much like one of those conversations. It isn't asking us to chase more. It isn't asking us to become someone different. It is inviting us to become more honest about what truly deserves our life. Because something remarkable happens when honesty enters the room. We begin hearing ourselves more clearly. We begin recognizing what no longer belongs. And little by little, our energy naturally returns to the things that matter most. That is the journey we'll explore together today. First, we'll listen for the quiet call that has been trying to reach us. Then we'll explore why letting go is often an act of kindness rather than loss. And finally, we'll discover how faithful attention allows the right parts of our lives to flourish. So before we begin, I'd like to leave you with one question. Don't answer it too quickly. Simply carry it with you as we walk together. What truly deserves your life? Three of the gods' magical items are becoming increasingly active in August. It's Jallarhorn, Gungnir, and Dropnir. Jallarhorn, the horn that awakens. I've noticed that people often imagine awakening as something dramatic. A bolt of lightning, a life-changing revelation, a moment so extraordinary that everything afterward is divided into before and after. Life certainly has moments like that, but they're surprisingly rare. More often, awakening begins quietly. It arrives as a question that refuses to leave, a conversation you keep replaying in your mind, a feeling you can't quite explain, or the growing realization that the person you've been trying to become is no longer the person you're meant to be. Jallarhorn has never been interested in startling us. It simply becomes impossible to ignore. People sometimes think the purpose of awakening is to change their lives. I've rarely found that to be true. Awakening doesn't create a different person. It reveals the one who has been patiently waiting beneath habit, expectation, and fear. There's an important difference. Many of us spend years becoming very good at meeting expectations. We learn what earns approval. We learn what keeps life comfortable. We learn what others expect from us. Without realizing it, we slowly begin arranging our lives around those expectations. Not because anyone intended harm, simply because it's what human beings naturally do. Until one day, something inside us begins asking a different question. Is this still true? Not, is this successful? Not, is this sensible? Not even, is this what everyone else would choose? But something much quieter. Is this truly mine? That question can be unsettling, because it doesn't always arrive with answers. Sometimes, it only brings honesty, and honesty has a curious way of making old certainties feel uncomfortable. Imagine a bird standing at the edge of its nest. For weeks, perhaps months, that nest has been exactly what it needed. It offered shelter, warmth, protection, everything required for growth. But there comes a morning when the very place that once offered safety begins to feel too small. The nest hasn't become wrong. The bird has simply become ready. Life is full of nests, Ideas we once needed, roles we faithfully carried, dreams that genuinely belonged to an earlier version of ourselves. We don't outgrow them because they failed us. We outgrow them because they succeeded. They helped us become who we are today, and now they quietly ask us to continue. I've noticed that people often resist this moment, not because they lack courage, but because familiarity is comforting. Even when it no longer nourishes us, we tell ourselves, perhaps I'll think about this next month. Perhaps this feeling will disappear. Perhaps I should be grateful for what I already have. Gratitude is a beautiful quality, but gratitude isn't the same as remaining where you've already finished growing. Sometimes the most grateful thing we can do is honor what a season has given us and then keep walking. This month, Jallarhorn asks a beautifully simple question. What part of yourself have you kept waiting? Don't rush to answer. The first answer is rarely the deepest one. Instead, notice. Notice what quietly excites you. Notice what conversations leave you feeling more alive. Notice what ideas continue returning. Notice where you feel strangely restless. Not all restlessness is dissatisfaction. Sometimes it's simply growth asking for room. I've come to believe that our lives change less through dramatic decisions than through honest attention. Long before we make different choices, we begin seeing differently. Long before we speak different words, we begin hearing a quieter voice within ourselves. Perhaps that's all Jallarhorn is asking of us this month. Not immediate action, not bold declarations, simply the willingness to listen, because awakening always begins there, with a person who finally becomes quiet enough to hear their own life calling them by name. And once we've heard that quiet call, something unexpected often happens. We begin noticing that not everything we've been carrying belongs to the person who has just awakened. Which brings us to the second companion walking beside us this month. Gungnir, the spear that never misses. People often misunderstand Gungnir. They imagine it arrives to take things away, to create loss, to bring endings. I've rarely found that to be true. Gungnir has never enjoyed taking things away. It simply has an extraordinary ability to recognize what has already reached the end of its purpose. There's an important difference. Sometimes we carry things long after they've stopped carrying us. Old ambitions, old identities, old expectations, old stories about who we believe we are. At one time, they served us well. They helped us make sense of life. They gave us direction. They protected us when we needed protecting. But not every truth is meant to remain with us forever. Life changes, people change, and wisdom asks us to change with them. I've noticed that many people confuse holding on with being faithful. They believe that letting go somehow dishonors the past. But imagine a gardener standing before an old apple tree. Year after year, the tree has grown faithfully. New branches have stretched toward the sky. Leaves have flourished. Fruit has appeared. It would seem strange if the gardener refused to prune it. After all, every branch is alive. Every branch has grown honestly, so why remove any of them? Because growth eventually creates its own challenge. Too many branches begin competing for the same sunlight. The tree spends its energy sustaining limbs that no longer help it flourish. The gardener doesn't prune because the tree has failed. The gardener prunes because the tree is thriving. Pruning isn't an act of punishment, it's an act of devotion. I've come to believe our lives are remarkably similar. The more experiences we gather, the more responsibilities we accept, the more dreams we pursue, the easier it becomes to carry far more than we were ever meant to. Some people carry obligations that belong to an earlier chapter of life. Others carry guilt that has already taught them everything it came to teach. Some continue carrying expectations that were never truly theirs to begin with, and many of us continue carrying versions of ourselves that quietly expired years ago. Not because we don't know how to let them go, but because they have become familiar. Familiarity has a remarkable way of disguising itself as necessity. We begin believing, I've always done it this way. This is simply who I am. People expect this from me. Yet life occasionally whispers, perhaps that was who you needed to be. But is it still who you are? That question can feel uncomfortable, because letting go often creates empty space, and empty space can feel frightening. We naturally want to fill it with another goal, another commitment, another distraction. Gungnir asks something much gentler. Leave the space empty for a while. Let yourself discover what the silence has to say. There is a curious freedom in empty hands, not because they have lost everything, but because they are finally able to receive something new. This month, Gungnir asks only one question. What are you still carrying that no longer belongs on your journey? Don't answer too quickly. Some things are obvious. Others reveal themselves gradually. Notice what consistently drains your energy. Notice which responsibilities feel complete rather than meaningful. Notice the conversations that belong to a version of yourself you've already outgrown. Notice the habits you defend without remembering why they began. Don't rush to throw anything away. Simply become curious. Awareness nearly always arrives before release. I've noticed that life rarely removes what matters. It gently reveals what no longer does. And once we see it clearly, letting go becomes less about sacrifice and more about making room. A river keeps flowing because it lets the water move. A forest stays alive because old leaves return to the soil. A tree bears sweeter fruit because it releases branches that have finished their work. Perhaps we are no different. Perhaps the life you're hoping to grow has been waiting, not for more effort, but for more space. Once space has been created, an interesting question naturally follows. If you can no longer give your energy to everything, what truly deserves it? That is where our final companion quietly steps forward, Dropnir, the ring that multiplies. After months like this, people often ask an understandable question. If I've listened more carefully, and if I've begun letting go, what comes next? It's a sensible question, but perhaps not the most helpful one. The better question is this. Now that you've created a little more space in your life, what deserves your faithful care? Dropnir has never been in a hurry. Perhaps that's why people sometimes overlook it. We're naturally drawn toward dramatic moments. The breakthrough, the bold decision, the exciting opportunity. Yet most meaningful lives are not built through dramatic moments. They're built through ordinary days. I've noticed that people often believe abundance arrives all at once, as though one lucky opportunity suddenly transforms everything. Occasionally that happens. More often, abundance arrives so quietly that we almost fail to notice it. It grows through conversations we continue having, relationships we continue nurturing, skills we continue practicing, promises we continue keeping, small choices, repeated with care. There is quiet magic in consistency. Imagine a baker rising before sunrise. Every morning, while the village is still asleep, she kneads the dough, measures the flour, waits patiently. She cannot hurry the bread. She cannot demand that the dough rise faster. She simply returns to the work, day after day, year after year. Eventually, people begin saying, she has a gift. Perhaps she does. But what they are really witnessing is years of faithful devotion that looked quite ordinary while it was happening. Life has a similar way of hiding its greatest transformations inside small routines. A parent reading one more bedtime story. A musician practicing scales that no audience will ever hear. A friend remembering to make one more phone call. Someone quietly choosing honesty instead of convenience. None of these moments seem remarkable by themselves. Yet together, they become a life. I've come to believe that one of the greatest misunderstandings about growth is the idea that we need to become more productive, more successful, more impressive. Dropner gently asks a different question. What if the goal isn't becoming more, but becoming more devoted? There's an important difference. One is driven by comparison. The other is guided by care. Comparison is always looking over the fence. Devotion keeps returning to the garden. It doesn't worry about how quickly another tree is growing. It simply continues watering its own. That is how forests are created, not through one extraordinary day, but through thousands of ordinary ones. This month, Dropner asks a beautifully grounding question. What deserves your faithful care? Notice the word faithful. Not occasional, not convenient, faithful, because what receives our attention eventually begins shaping us in return. Spend enough time practicing kindness, and kindness becomes more natural. Spend enough time listening deeply, and you become someone people feel safe speaking with. Spend enough time creating something meaningful, and your work begins reflecting your character. We often imagine we're shaping our habits. In time, our habits quietly begin shaping us. So this month, notice where your attention naturally wants to return. Not because you feel guilty, not because someone expects it, but because something within you recognizes its value. Perhaps it's your family, perhaps it's your health, perhaps it's your craft, perhaps it's a friendship you've unintentionally neglected. Or perhaps it's simply becoming the kind of person who does small things well. Don't underestimate that. Extraordinary lives are surprisingly ordinary while they're being lived. They are built through mornings no one applauds, conversations no one remembers, acts of kindness no one notices, and promises quietly kept. Life grows whatever we faithfully return to. Choose carefully, because your attention is never simply creating your future, it is creating you. We've walked with 3 companions this month. One helped us hear, one helped us release. One reminded us what is worthy of our devotion. Individually, each offers a valuable lesson. Together, they reveal something even more important. I've noticed that we often think growth happens one decision at a time, as though life asks us to solve one problem, then move on to the next. But life rarely works that way. More often, the most meaningful changes happen because several quiet truths begin supporting one another. That is what I see happening this month. Giallarhorn begins by asking us to listen, not to the loudest voices around us, to the quieter voice within us. The one we've perhaps postponed for too long. The one that has patiently waited beneath responsibility, beneath habit, beneath expectation. Once we hear that voice, something interesting happens. Gungnir quietly steps forward. Because once we become honest, we also begin recognizing what no longer belongs. Not everything we've been carrying deserves to continue the journey with us. Some responsibilities have already fulfilled their purpose. Some fears no longer protect us. Some identities have become too small for the person we've become. Only then does Dropner enter, not with excitement, not with urgency, but with quiet patience. It reminds us that empty space is never the final destination. It is an invitation to devote ourselves more fully to what truly matters. I've come to believe these 3 companions are describing the same journey from different angles: awakening, release, devotion. Notice that none of them ask us to become someone else. They simply help us become more completely ourselves. Perhaps that's why this month feels so gentle. Its lessons aren't found in dramatic events. They're found in ordinary moments of honesty. The conversation where you admit what you've known for months. The afternoon when you realize you're carrying something you no longer need. The quiet morning when you decide to return your attention to something that has always mattered. Those moments may seem small, yet life has an interesting habit. The moments that feel smallest while we're living them often become the ones we remember years later. Not because they were loud, but because they quietly changed the direction of our lives. If there is one thread connecting everything we've explored together today, perhaps it is this. A meaningful life isn't created by doing more. It is created by becoming more honest about where your life belongs. And honesty has a remarkable way of simplifying things. It helps us hear more clearly, carry less, and care more deeply. As you move through August, resist the temptation to ask, "What should I change?" Instead, become curious. Notice what keeps returning to your attention. Notice what quietly drains your energy. Notice what leaves you feeling more fully alive after you've finished doing it. This isn't a month for rushing toward answers. It's a month for becoming a careful observer of your own life. When you feel restless, pause before reacting. Ask yourself, what is this restlessness trying to show me? When something feels complete, don't immediately replace it. Allow yourself to experience the space that's been created. You may discover that clarity enters more easily than busyness ever did. And when you recognize something that truly deserves your care, protect it, return to it, give it your best attention. Not once, not when it's convenient, but faithfully. Remember, our lives are not shaped by what occasionally captures our attention. They are shaped by what consistently receives it. Before we part, I'd like to leave you with one final thought. I've rarely found that clarity arrives all at once. More often, it grows quietly. We hear one honest truth. We release one unnecessary burden. We choose one worthwhile commitment. And then we repeat the process again and again. Until one day we look back and realize that the person we were searching for wasn't waiting somewhere ahead of us. They were slowly being revealed through every honest choice we made along the way. So as August unfolds, don't worry about becoming a different person. Become a more honest one. Listen carefully, release gently, devote yourself faithfully. The rest has a remarkable way of taking care of itself. Until next month, walk well.